and we're going to welcome up our next speaker. Doug Peterson is our next speaker. Can you go ahead and unmute and come on up here?
Hey there, Jared. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you? Welcome.
Good.
Welcome to the summit. We're grateful to hear from you.
Thank
Tell us
you.
where you're zooming in from today, Doug.
Hey, I'm from Missouri. I'm from North
Okay.
Missouri.
Very, very good. All right.
I do
Well, we're
have
going to
some
let you
slides.
run with this.
All right, I'm gonna drive here and get some slides up real quick.
Okay.
Try to anyway.
That is cool.
So, can you see?
Yep, we can see it, Doug. Looks good.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good. So, hey, thanks for the invitation, Jared. Happy to be here. As I said, I'm Doug Peterson. I am from Missouri, North Missouri. There is a North Missouri and a South Missouri, and they're very different. So I'm from North Missouri. That's more of the ag land as opposed to the Ozarks in South Missouri. But my background is I did a career with NRCS. I spent much of that time, as a grazing specialist or a soil health specialist, working with producers really all over the country. Doing workshops, helping producers implement, the regenerative ag principles and practices. Now, we didn't always call them that, did we? It hadn't always been called regenerative agriculture, um, but finally, about 4 years ago, I'd had enough of the bureaucracy, and so I kind of decided to hang it up and was kind of hanging out. And I had a couple of fellas named Gabe Brown and Dr. Alan Williams that came calling, and they were starting a venture called Regenified, and they were looking for somebody to help out with it. And so currently I am the science officer for Regenified, but I've also had a lifelong grazing operation here in Missouri where we live. Right now we run a couple hundred mama cows. It's kind of varied in size, been as much as 400, but um, the conversion of cropland in this part of the world kind of limits grassland quite a bit anymore. So we're down to about a couple hundred mama cows. So anyway, I've always had an interest and a passion kind of for teaching and helping educate folks. And so I kind of want to run through today just kind of a really quick presentation on soil health and economic resilience. And really we're going to kind of focus on the economics a little bit. I heard Jared just a minute ago say that, agriculture has been highly productive, but not always been highly profitable. And boy, that's so true. And so we're gonna kind of touch on a few things in both cropland as well as grassland a little bit. So, and I know it's a quick 30 minutes here, so I'm gonna try to bust on through some of this really fast. There's no doubt in my mind that um, that these regenerative principles that are taught, and it's a variety of things across the country, right? But there's no doubt that these regenerative principles and uh, that they have an ability to improve soil functions like nutrient cycling and regulating water and filtering and buffering pollutants. Really healthy soils, well managed healthy soils create this stable platform that we can grow and produce things on, right? That's healthy, that's nutrient dense, but yet also provides tremendous biodiversity in the soil, in plants, in insects, and birds and animals. Leading to all these great environmental benefits. But the question I always get whenever you start talking about regenerative practices is, man, can I make all those practices and principles pay? If you're talking about cropland, they always say, oh, I can't. Can I grow anything if I'm no-tilling or planting a cover crop? Or if you're talking about a grazing operation, um, how can I pay for all that fence and water that you want me to put in? Um, and so, again, as he mentioned a while ago, for a long time in agriculture, we've been taught that the only way to make something pay is if it increases yield or we produce more. We very, very seldom are taught to cut expenses as a way to be more profitable. And so we're gonna talk about a couple of things briefly today, mainly about reducing production cost a little bit, but then increasing the price that you receive for your production, for whatever it is that you're producing. I'll start out a little bit with cropland, and I know a lot of you guys are probably grazers, but I've also found that at least here in the Midwest, from where I'm from, that the vast majority of our grazers also have some cropland as well. So, and honestly, there's probably more room for improvement on a lot of our cropland than there is on our grassland. So we're just going to touch on two or three things right here briefly on cropland. So how do we reduce those costs? That are out there for reducing unwanted plants, whether it be chemical or tillage. How to reduce those fertilizer needs, and what's the cost associated with that are the two we're going to focus on really. So here's a great picture of a bean field with a tremendous amount of residue. It's actually a cover crop, and so the thing you have to understand about this cover crop is it's not just about conservation. It's about a production practice. It's about improving water infiltration, about retaining moisture. It's about weed control. And so all of those things are about production, not just about conservation. And so understanding plant succession is really, to me, the key when it comes to understanding what that cover crop does, particularly from a weed control standpoint. There's three things that really cause any plant to germinate, right? Any seed to germinate: moisture, temperature, and what's the third one? Light. And that's one that a lot of people miss. These annual weeds, generally they're a pretty small seed, and so they need a specific amount of light to germinate. That's their mechanism to know that they're close enough to the surface, so if they germinate, they can make it to the top and be exposed to sunlight, so they can continue to gather sunlight and grow. Here's a great example from North Dakota. This was a pea crop the year before. Then they planted a cover crop, a winter terminating cover crop on the right half, and no cover crop on the left half. The following spring, we've got all these winter annuals, these spring annuals growing right here on that left side. And that's because the soil was bare, and that is God's method of providing ground cover. If the soil is bare, it's going to germinate those seeds that are in that germination zone and then cover the soil. If we've got a cover crop on the right side, we don't have all those weeds germinating, do we? So here's a great example again of some guys that planted a cover crop, then planted soybeans into it, and you can see the rows are going straight through this field. The right side of the field did not have a cover crop. The left side did, and the reason you can't see the rows to the right is because of all the weeds that are coming up in between the rows, all the pigweed in this case that's coming up between the rows. You don't have that on the left side. So most of our long-term no-tillers and cover croppers are reporting that they can reduce herbicide costs by as much as a third, okay, over conventional methods. So that's just one way of cutting costs, and we're gonna blaze through these really quick here. I'll give you a summary at the end on several things. The next one on cropland is nutrient efficiency. Many people do not understand that in our tilled conventional soils, in our cropland soils, that only 30 to 50% of the nitrogen that's applied in the form of fertilizer ever makes it into that crop. 70% up to 70% of that fertility is actually lost, actually never goes into that crop. It leaches through the soil, it runs off of that field, because even though we're applying that soil, that nutrient cycle in the soil is still a biological system that relies on soil biology to get the nutrient that we apply into that plant. And that's why when we go into these cover crop no-till systems and restore that biological component in the soil, we can dramatically increase that nutrient efficiency, thereby reducing the amount of fertilizer that's needed. Again, we've got operations that are dropping their fertility rates by 50, 60, 70% because now they don't have all this leaching going on. They have a healthy biological component. So the same goes for phosphorus. Again, 50% lost in a conventional system. So just kind of as a summary then here, um, as a summary here, um, we've got a potential reduction in cost on cropland from reducing spray, from reducing fertility needs. I also threw in a couple other things here that we haven't really talked about, but just to give us some more valid numbers. When you switch to that kind of a system, you can reduce labor and equipment costs dramatically. And then one that is always been important to me is preventing erosion. And so that's $6 right there. It doesn't seem like a big number, but that's not offsite damage. That's not offsite costs. That is the nutrients, the N, P, and K in the soil that's lost through the typical erosion rates on cropland, on tilled croplands. And then another one that is quickly becoming utilized, more common around the country, is adding supplemental feed from livestock to that cropland in the form of a cover crop. So we can easily drop our costs by $300 an acre on those cropland by using regenerative practices. So we're going to jump gears a little bit to grassland, probably something that's a little more near and dear to most of you guys. Again, kind of the same topics here. So what is grazing management? There's a lot of names out there, isn't there? Holistic management, management intensive grazing, adaptive grazing, prescribed grazing. There's all kinds of names. Honestly, I don't care what you call it, just do it. Basically, it's us controlling those animals similar to what would have happened in those natural systems, right? Here's a picture here of some bison up in North Dakota. What would normally have caused those bison to move around, grazing an area, moving on and resting those plants, right? It would have been predators. We all understand that. In our environment today, we don't necessarily have predators here in Missouri. We become the predator. We control the cattle so that we move them when they need to be moved. We create this animal impact. That animal impact is very, very powerful. We can control weeds with it. We can stimulate nutrient cycling. We can trample seeds into the surface of the soil. We can do a wide variety of things with those cattle if we understand how powerful that tool of animal impact really is. Here's a great example. A friend of mine, Mark Brownlee, down in South Missouri, had a tremendous amount of sumac and some other woodies coming in. He upped his game a little bit on management, started moving a couple times a day, and pretty much the brush went away because those cattle became so aggressive in their grazing that he was able to eliminate that. Chorizo lespedeza, kind of the same way, by increasing the management. The Chorizo lespedeza is a non-issue, and I know that's something that's causing a lot of problems across Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, even into Kansas a little bit. So, controlling those cattle and understanding how to manage them to create those impacts is very, very powerful tool. Something else is a mineral cycle. From a standpoint of what does it cost us to fertilize pastures? Maybe not rangeland out west, but boy, a lot of our pastures back in this part of the world get fertilized annually. And so this was some research done actually by Jim Garish down at the University of Missouri years ago now, probably 30 years ago, I suppose. They looked at how based on the rotation frequency, how long it would take to get a manure pile on every square yard. And so the numbers in white really are their research. So they showed that if you were on a 2-day rotation frequency or a 2-day grazing period, you could get a manure pile on every single square yard about every 2 years. So what if we up that? What if we change that to, daily moves or multiple moves a day? Here's a picture I took several years ago, 15 years ago, it looks like. This was on daily moves or 2-day moves. I don't recall exactly which, but you can take a look at how closely those manure piles are. Well, here's a really cool thing. For every manure pile, there's 5 to 7 urine patches out there. So effectively, as I graze across that field under this daily rotation, daily moves, I'm essentially totally fertilizing that field. It's not ending up under the shade tree. It's not ending up next to the water. It's ending up systematically spread out across this field. And so to me, when I see a picture like this, I think of the old cash registers, just pulling the lever and it goes cha-ching. That's dollars to me. Okay. And we'll touch on those dollars in a minute, just really how much it is. The next one I see all the time when I see different studies, there's some SPA information that shows, that in most operations, the driving force in profitability is the cost of feed. In many operations, 60% of their operating cost is feed. So if we can impact those feed costs, we're going to quickly affect profit. What drives feed cost? Almost always it's two things. It's purchased feed or machinery used for hay. And so in my mind, we've got to do everything we can. We've got to do everything we can to reduce purchased feed and reduce any kind of machinery and any kind of hay. So I'm going to look for a grazing operation, that can do a variety of things to graze all year long. We've been taught for so long that, man, if you don't have grass growing, you got to feed hay. I think technology, even in the form of really nice hay equipment, nice tractors, nice balers, I think that really nice equipment has made much of animal agriculture pretty lazy when it comes to grazing management. Every year I just see more and more acres of hay being baled and hauled literally all over the country. I know operations all over the country that feed hay for 6 or 7 months a year. And not only is it costly, but I will tell you from a soils standpoint, from a soil health standpoint, everything I have seen from a soil biology standpoint, from a carbon standpoint, from a infiltration standpoint, tells me that haying is just as degrading to the soil as tillage is. Yep, you heard me right. We see it over and over. Hay fields are just as degraded biologically, just as degraded from an infiltration standpoint as a tilled crop field. So we've got to figure out a way to get out of that. So here's an operation here. This actually is one of ours a few years ago. Grazing in December, grazing stockpiled forage that was grown in the middle of the summer. A lot of people would have bailed that. But we just grazed it and moved on. Okay. Here's in Illinois, grazing all winter, grazing in February. This is an innovative one here, grazing in, taking a cash crop. This is Harry Cope over by St. Louis, grazing the cash crop. Harry's getting between 300 and 400 animal days to the acre, grazing standing unharvested milo. Okay. So another March and April grazing, stockpiling some forage. It probably weathered quite a bit over the winter, but tremendous opportunity to graze that weathered down brown residual with a little bit of green coming up through it. Tremendous forage for those cattle. Same goes on the crop field. We mentioned that a while ago. So just some quick numbers. If we know that a lot of pastures are sprayed, and a lot are sprayed for weeds or brush, we can eliminate that. We can we can eliminate that fertility that I showed you a while ago, the manure spread out across that field. That's the equivalent of about $124 per grazing event that is spread across that field. It's up to you to choose where that is spread. Cheaper livestock feed and reduced hay equipment. $250, $300 easily. Okay. The next one that I just want to quickly touch on is increasing price for your product, right? There's a lot of opportunities to do direct marketing. We probably got one of the best direct marketers going to speak next. And so a lot of opportunities to do that. Farmers market, you've heard about that already. On farm markets, wholesale products directly through a retail outlet. Right now, there's a tremendous opportunity in agriculture for some marketing like this. And so what are the consumers saying? Here's kind of some stuff from Spins a little bit. It shows that, regenerative products have been growing by 20% over the last year, that, 54% of consumers are really interested in trying something that is regenerative, trying a product. Consumers are really drawn to those regenerative practices. They want to choose a product that is not only good for them, but also a product that supports farmers, that takes care of the environment. It's kind of at the same time. And so we also know that 75% of consumers, because they don't know exactly what regenerative means, 75% of those consumers are looking for some type of a certification when buying those products. And that's kind of where we were at when Gabe and Alan came to me and said, hey, we know there's this momentum, but man, we have this opportunity to change production in agriculture to really produce high value, high nutrient dense foods. But like everything, there's going to be a lot of advertisement. There's going to be a lot of claims being made that really aren't necessarily true. And so they started Regenified as a certification company that has good common sense approach to an in-field verification and a certification that goes on a product. It's been approved by Whole Foods. It's been approved by USDA, by other organizations. And so we see this as a way for farms that maybe don't necessarily want to do all their own marketing, as a way to participate in a program that has some validation, some verification that can then go into a company like Whole Foods and say, okay, we have a product that has been approved. It has these standards behind it. And so, our progress to date, we're in a lot of different countries, primarily North America. We're focusing on our home country, no doubt. But any kind of product anywhere, row crops, vegetables, grains, vineyards, even a little bit of wild harvest in Africa. The thing from a producer standpoint, from you guys' standpoint, is on the right side there. We have been able to, because of this certification, because of that process that we go through, we have been able to get anywhere from 5 to 250% premiums for some products across the country. Not on all of them, but certainly on a significant amount of them, we can absolutely get a premium for many producers across the country. And I know to finish up here, we got a couple of minutes maybe for questions, but one of the things that we always offer for folks is the opportunity to have a one-on-one with our farmer success team, to see if there's something that we can offer you. We can tailor feedback directly to you for your type of operation, for the context of your operation, for whatever practices you're doing. if you just hit regenified.com, hit the contact us button, mention the regenerative legacy, and somebody will get a hold of you and head down that road. So any questions? I'm gonna stop sharing here to answer
That
any
is
questions.
wonderful. That is wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. So everybody got their contact information for Regenified, and
I'll put it in the chat here too.
okay, yeah, if you could do that, that would be great. That would be great. Is there a, I know when we talked about it, is there a specific scale at which people qualify to work with you? What,
No, anybody in any scale. Obviously, if it's an operation that already has a tremendous clientele and a direct marketing business already, I don't know that we're probably going to be able to add much value to an operation like that. Joel Salatin, for example, I doubt we're going to add much of a much of a benefit to an operation like that. But operations that have some scale, some size, that don't necessarily want to go down the road from a marketing standpoint, we're building out both the supply side as well as the retail side. We've got producers. We've also got retailers coming to us saying, "Hey, we need beef. We need grain for flour. We need grain for chicken feed." So we are coming at it kind of from both ends and trying to meet everybody in the middle.
like it? That's great. Yeah, well, wonderful. We appreciate that. Any other quick questions? Yeah, and please, as we always do, share in the chat what your epiphanies, what your takeaways are from Doug's presentation. Let's take the opportunity to teach each other. And
And I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat too. I know 30 minutes is pretty fast.
yep, it was pretty rapid fire here. Somebody's asking, let me scroll back up. Where can I access the information about the impact of haymaking being similar to tilling? I want to share that with my family team.
Oh, have to look. There's some research out there. I'll be honest, the vast majority of that is just um, years of soil testing, years of doing infiltration rates. Um, I can just about always guarantee if I go into a operation that has hay fields that's been hayed a long time, those will be the poorest infiltration rates on the farm.
Interesting. Interesting. And is that, I mean, are they integrating livestock or are they feeding it back on?
It,
Or is
if
it
if they're if they're if they're integrating livestock and feeding that hay back there, it's not as bad. But from just a quick scenario. So if you think about it, you go in and hay a field off. Um, we're always looking for the hot, warm day, aren't we? So that the hay will cure. We don't ever do it on a cool, cloudy day. We do it on a hot day, and so we remove all that vegetation off of that field. What did we just do to that soil from a temperature standpoint? We spiked it very, very quickly. So that soil, those organisms in the soil, that's really considered an aquatic ecosystem. Those organisms in the soil, they move in the films of water on the surfaces of those aggregates. The bacteria, the fungi, they're swimmers. They don't walk. And so when we heat it up really fast, they all die. They don't have the opportunity to go dormant or move away. In a grazing operation where we graze it, we may graze it down over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 days or even a day, but generally it's not as much plant biomass removal as that haying operation. And so that soil ecosystem has a chance to slow down and go dormant at its own pace, as opposed to that very unnatural pace of total plant removal, no residual left whatsoever. And our hay equipment today has just gotten, boy, it is, they take it pretty short. There's not much left. So
Yep. Yeah. That's all about efficiency with maybe without counting the ancillary costs. So Doug,
you bet.
thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you being part of this summit and the value that you've added to the participants here. And yes, please go
Absolutely.
ahead and send him some gratitude in the chat. Let him know. There might be a question or two, Doug, if you want to answer those in the chat.
I'll be here for a while. You bet. Thanks for putting these
Okay,
on.
you bet. You bet.